This is Mrs. O'Loughlin, and we are going to be talking about data today. And the data that we're going to be looking at, if we take a look at our standards and our links on our web page, is going to be arrays and lists. So if I scroll down, we are going to be filling in these two categories, arrays and lists, and I'm going to be replacing this video with a new one at the end of the presentation here. And so arrays are a special type of data in Java and in many programming languages. When we work with arrays, it is a series or a list of variables in a computer's memory, and all the variables are going to share the same name, and each variable is going to have a different subscript. So I'm going to be stepping through this example that I have here of an array of my friends, and so each array is going to have a data type, and in this example string is the data type. It has a name, my friends is the name of the array, and it has elements. So this one has 3 elements, and so the length of the array is 3 elements. If I jump over to JDoodle to show this in action, an array needs a data type. So we have our string is the data type, square brackets indicates that it's an array. My friends is the name of my array, and I am populating or filling this array with 3 strings, and they are my friends' names. And so because they're strings, they need to be enclosed in the double quotes, and then we are going to work with this list of strings. This one is just a straight up an array. And so the name again was my friends, the data type is a string, and then it has 3 elements in it. If I want to access array elements, I need to use special notation. So if I'm going to access these array elements, I need to do something like this. I need to use my friends, and I use a square bracket, and then what's called an index. That 0 there is called an index. If I run this code, it should print the first friend in my list. My first friend is Lori, and it prints the first name. This uses what's called a 0 indexing, okay, which means that it starts the indexes at 0. That's what's inside that square bracket is an index, and then everything else counts up from that by 1. They count by ones because they are stored right next to each other in memory. And so it has kind of like a location 0, location 1, location 2, even though that's not exactly how it would be represented. But if I execute this, this should print all of my friends' names, and it does on different lines. If I wanted to find out how many friends I had without actually looking, remember that we just saw that you can actually print the length of an array, and the length of the array, or my number of friends, is going to be how many friends are in that. And I'm going to use concatenation here, and I use the name of the array, myFriends.length, in order to access that. And so it should print that I have 3 friends if I don't have any syntax errors, and my number of friends is 3. If I want to add a little space there to make the output a little bit more readable, I could. So in an array, this one is populated automatically, and this one is, it's populated with a list, including, you have to use curly brackets in order to indicate that list here, and then it's outputted one at a time. It's very common that when I work with a list that I output a list using a for loop. If I were to write the code for the for loop, I would start with for int for index I equals 0, I is less than my friends.length. There are 3 elements, but the highest index that I want to use is a 2, so I need to say less than there. And then I could borrow one of these system.out.println statements and put it inside this loop. And instead of using a 0, I want that index to go 0 and then 1 and then 2, so my loop index variable keeps track of that for me. So it will loop through, and it will print the same thing as these 3 lines of code that I'm commenting out if I don't have any syntax errors. So it should still process all of my friends using what's called a for loop. and that's pretty common. I have a mistake, and my mistake is that I did not use the same syntax. Look at the error message. It says cannot find symbol. Whenever you have an error message that says cannot find symbol, that usually means we made a typo with a variable name. So we'll see if it executes again. And now it says variable length is not of type string. And so I need to do a little bit more finagling to get it to work. And we have success. So that shows you how to process a list with a for loop. Our PowerPoint slides show some additional examples. It talks about accessing arrays. Just to kind of review these kind of quick, keep in mind that arrays will all share the same name. They share the same data type. You cannot mix data types. They have elements are stored in different subscripts, and they often have different values, although they could have the same, but they often have different values. The length of the array is equal to the number of elements, and the subscripts start at 0. Here's another example of declaring arrays. This one uses declaring a constant size for the array, final int size. This is frequently done in order to make the code a little bit more user-friendly and easier to debug. If we take a look at the design tip at the bottom of the screen here, I don't know if you can see it, but it says that the constant size is used for making changing the code later on easier. And you can change the size and how you process the array in one location. So if I had an array of 10 elements instead of 2, I just need to change the 2 to a 10 as an example. This is another example using an initialization list and using that constant size. A constant in Java is declared with the keyword final right here. And so this one stores a list of all of the months of the year, and so there's 12 of them. Please note again it goes to I less than size. The highest index here will be 11. So December, which is the 12th month, will be in an index of 11, and then it's using a for loop in order to process. Another example, just indicating the for loop is used for processing. When you guys did the piano project used arrays, and it did the declarations with an initialization list. It didn't use a constant because it doesn't need to. If you have a declaration list, you don't actually have to have it. And so if I just use this list like that, that array will have a size of 12. I can still use the length factor, and they actually use that when they populate the arrays in Greenfoot. They use this white keys.length, which is the number of elements. What's unique here, though, is white keys is paired with white notes. This is a special occurrence in arrays when you have a one-to-one correspondence. And so white keys.length makes sure that we process all the keys. And then white keys and white notes are related by what we call the index right here. When you declare and process an integer array, this is something similar. It's just an integer list, and you can process it the same way that I did with the strings. The only difference is you use the keyword int over here on the left-hand side. So you have an integer array. So again, you have the data type, you have a name, you have to have the brackets to indicate it's an array, then you have the name, and then you have your initialization list. When you use data that's related to each other, like in the piano keys, this actually has a special name. It's called parallel arrays, and they are related by the same index. So for example here, Lori has an index of 0 for the name, and then the age is 52. So if I were to print out my friend bracket 0 is age bracket ages is the name of this second array, it's going to print Lori is age 52. So it picks the string from this first array and the integer from the second array to print them out using concatenation here. This type of relationship is called a parallel array. They have related data in the same index. Your piano project has parallel arrays also. You have the keys associated with the sounds. S is associated with 3D. D is associated with 3E, etc. Sometimes you try to go beyond the end of the array and you get an error message. So just note right here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, but because of 0 indexing, This highest index will be 4 here. And so we have to watch that because I try to print nums bracket 5. I get this array index out of bounds exception, which means I've tried to go beyond the memory location. I've gone beyond the array bounds is what that's called. So be careful. That's you want to use a less than symbol instead of less than or equal to in order to prevent that error. Greenfoot also uses a for loop when processing arrays. We looked at that actually in, I think, a previous slide. But the index I is used for both the white keys and the white notes because they're using that parallel array relationship. I believe that's going to wrap it up for the video on arrays. If we go back, just briefly, remember that arrays will all have the same name. They'll share a data type. They will have different values in each subscript. The length of the array is the number of elements. The subscripts start at 0, so therefore the highest subscript is always 1 less than the number of elements. Using JDoodle here to also summarize a few things, keep in mind when you are creating an array that you might be asked to declare an array, and technically the array declaration, this particular line here is a declaration and an initialization. It declares and initializes. So if I ask you to create a declaration that's just a declaration, as an example, I might say something like int size is assigned 3, and then I'm going to create a string array, and I'm just going to name this one friends, and then you have to say new string and then bracket 3. But I don't want to use 3, I want to use the variable size because that's a good programming practice. That right there should declare an array called friends, and it has a size of 3. I'm going to comment out my other one, and then we are going to, this one right here is outputting what was stored in that array, and since we no longer initialized it, we have to actually fill the array by doing the following. So if I'm going to declare it this way, in order to fill the array, I have to do friends bracket 0, and it's going to be assigned Lori. And likewise with the other elements. Friends bracket 1 will be assigned my second friend. So the indexing is off by 1 because of the starting at 0. And then friends bracket 2 is going to be assigned Christina. So when we work through this, that right there is called you're filling the array or populating it. Okay, so a couple different ways and terminology that you would use. This right here is called declaring an array, and the lines right below it are populating or filling the array. Filling or populating the array. And up here you have declaring and initializing all in one line. And so if I want to make sure that this worked correctly, I would come down here and use a for loop. I changed the name of the array because I have friends here, and we'll cross my fingers to see if I have any syntax errors. There happens to be one, so if I go back up, it's not my friends.length but friends.length in order to use that for loop. And then again, I changed the name of the array, so I have to make and change all references to that, and it prints the names of my friends again. So you have declaring and initializing all in one line. You have declaring an array using a constant on the next two lines, lines 5 and 6. Lines 7 through 9 are populating the array, filling it, and then the next set of the loop here prints it, processes it with a for loop, and last but not least we print how many are in the array to get that output. So just a little bit of that terminology because you might be using that.